muscle pain increasingly.
Hey there, welcome to a new video. Rampage Open Air 2026 was insane and it inspired me a lot to work on more tearout stuff. And in today's video, I want to show you how you can create a tearout gun with only Ableton stock effects. So we won't use any third-party plugins. And before we get into it, I quickly want to show you my highlight from Rampage Open Air 2026. Riot brought me on stage to play out one of my tearout ideas, and this was just a full circle moment. So thank you once again to Riot, you are the best. And this is the clip.
I believe in this kid. What the fuck?
And we also got a different POV, which was also really, really cool. And so on and so on. You can see the full reel on my Instagram. And especially this moment, but also the Nimda set, which was incredible, inspired me a lot to work on more heavy stuff. And this is why I took the challenge and made a tearout gun only with Ableton stock effects. And this is what we are going to dive into now. A tearout gun relies on 4 major layers. The most important one is the sub bass. After that, we got the tonal layer. Then we need a noise layer and we need a transient layer on top. I also added a 5th layer, which just added some more density throughout the entire tearout gun, and we will go through all the layers step by step. And you can also listen to the result at the end of the video. First, I draw this MIDI pattern, which was just a simple pattern with some note changes: D, D sharp, F, D sharp, D. So nothing special. I loaded in an operator, which we are using here for the sub bass. I'm using a sine table right here, but I also added this additional harmonic here to make the sub a little bit fuller. And we also have a pitch bend on the right, 75% pitch bend movement. And it's also quite loud. We're even clipping a little bit, but there's so much processing following up, so it does not really matter. The shape for the envelope of the pitch bend looks like this. The envelope shape of the sub bass looks like this. I made sure there was no release, so the notes don't blend into each other, which I wanted to avoid. And after that, I added an EQ to just cut out some of the harmonics. And this also made the sub not clip anymore, because we reduced the loudness. And after that, I loaded in the disperser rack, which is Ableton stock. So you can just type in disperser and there will a rack plop up. And then you can load this in. And this is really nice to disperse the sub a little bit. Not much. But if you have disperser, you can also use disperser, obviously, which is even a little bit easier. After that, I added the kick tight corpus preset, which helps us giving the sub bass a different tonality and make it a little bit warmer. I also changed the decay a little bit, if I remember correctly, and set the tune to the root note of the sub bass, which was a D. Then I added another EQ to just cut out some of the mids. And that's it for the first layer. Now we can dive into the second layer, which is noise. And for this, I opened Serum and resampled noise because I did not find a stock noise sample. I think I don't have the stock samples installed. So I'm pretty sure there's a stock white noise sample in Ableton. So if you have that, use that. But I just recorded a noise sample and then loaded it into the sampler. I also added the pitch device here because I wanted this to be played at a higher transposition, 3 octaves up. I also set the sampler on the one-shot mode and did some fade out here, so it's more plucky. After that, I added an EQ to just cut out some of the mids and the lows. EQ to check again. Then I added some spectral time, but not much. This does not really do anything. Just a little bit of widening and metallicness, but yeah, it's not really audible. Then we have some more EQing. There's some drum bass for transient shaping, so we are turning it into a rim shot basically a little bit. Then there's a little bit of reverb going on. but not really much. Some more EQing. A gate. And some OTT to level it out a little bit more. And an EQ. And some chorus sample for widening. What I would do if I was not relying on the sampler is that I would just render out the hits and place them in audio, because you can hear sometimes it's louder, sometimes it's quieter. It's because of the transient shaping and the compression, which basically follows up because of that. I would recommend just resampling it to audio and placing it under the hits, so it always has the same input volume when it hits, so the same strength of the transients. This is what I usually would do different, but today I'm doing it this way. Of course, you can level it out with limiting and stuff. It's not really audible at the end of the day anymore, so I just kept it that way. After that, we have the tonal layer, which I made with Collision. So if you don't know, Collision is an instrument in Ableton which relies on the corpus basically. So it's corpus, but as a playable instrument. And this is what it sounds like. So you can hear the resonance. And I tweaked the settings a little bit, added the membrane thing here, played around with the decay. And the tuning is also 40 semitones up. And then I EQ'd it a little bit. And added OTT. A lot of OTT, as you can see here, 20 decibels output. Then we have a gate, which does not do much here. And now we have a parallel chain. The first chain goes into an EQ to just check the frequency spectrum again. And then we have a saturator, which just makes it more massive and more saturated. Then an EQ to cut out the low end, which we don't need. And then there's a dynamic tube for some cool distortion, some more EQ to always make sure there's no low end. And then we have another parallel chain. And the first parallel chain goes into this hybrid reverb. I also leveled it down by around almost 8 decibels. And I'm using the convolution algorithm right here. And the small ambience convolution impulse response, a little bit of attack, a little bit of decay. Also, I cranked up the stereo all the way up. In the EQ, I think I did not touch anything. And then there's an OTT, but not much, and some EQ. And a gate to just cut out some of the more quieter parts. And the second parallel chain within this chain is just the dry signal, cranked up by 6 decibels. So we get a lot of power out of this. And I know I'm clipping, but there's so much processing following up, and it really helps bring up the sound I found out for this. Earlier, you might remember there was also a parallel chain going on. So in this section, we have a parallel chain which goes into a chorus ensemble. Some utility to just spread it all the way up to the maximum width. Some more reverb. And this does not really do anything besides creating some crackliness. And we have some OTT, which brings up this weird texture now. I know it sounds a bit random, but it just helps us support the layering a little bit. And you cannot really hear it. I think this step is necessary. Did like maybe 0.5%. And all these parallel chains sound like this together. So the one which is most audible is basically the one which is cranked up by 6 decibels. You can hear a little bit of the reverb convoluted signal. This one is the most prominent one. So basically the dry signal cranked up. This goes into a saturator, which basically brought up everything a little bit more. And then some more EQ. And that's it for the main tonal layer. After that, we have an additional supportive tonal layer, which goes more into a supportive role to fill out the frequency spectrum. It's also using collision, but 24 semitones lower than the first collision. So this one was 40 semitones up, as you can see here. And this new one is only 16 semitones up. And I think the other settings are the same. In EQ again, cut out some of the lower mids, some OTT. So you can already hear this is more for the mid area to fill out the mid frequencies. A gate again, which isn't doing anything at the moment. some EQ to bring up some of the mids and tame down some of the highs, which I did not want here. A saturator. And here you can really hear the full mid character. Using the bass shaper right here. And now an EQ. Got some of the mids again. An OTT again. But not that much. Only 32%. A reverb. A dynamic tube, which isn't doing much. And some hybrid reverb again. Also on the convolution preset. I think this is the same convolution preset as before. And an EQ. This is just a supportive layer. And these two collision layers sound like this together. So without the new one and with the new one. So it's just a really minimal difference. Maybe you can hear 50% more full mids with this second collision layer. Also, you may notice that the main collision layer is cranked up by 2.6 decibels here on this channel. And all this goes into crew processing. And the crew processing is really the important step right here. Now you really need to bring all the layers sound like one big and massive tearout gun. And I think many people have difficulties bringing sounds together, making them fat together. And I think you will learn a lot now. Of course, I'm only using stock effects now, but in my usual process, I would do things slightly different, but I try to mimic it the best I could. And I'm pretty sure you will like the result later on. All the layers together right now sound like this. So you can hear the sub, you can hear the tonality, you can hear the mids a little bit, you can hear the noise. Now we can close this and go into the crew processing. The first step was the dynamic tube. You can hear the more we bring it up, the more fizzly the low end gets, which is really cool. But I did not want to do too much of that yet. So this is really nice to get the sub a little bit stronger. After that, we have raw, and raw is really, really important in the process of fattening up everything. So raw is multi-band distortion, but you can also use it as a single instance or as a serial or parallel instance. And I'm using it as a multi-band instance right here. So we have 3 bands right now. The low band sounds like this now with the diode shaper and this amount, this bias. Then we have the mids. Some soft saturation and the highs. And everything is on 78% mix. So without and with. So you can already hear it sounds fuller and it sounds more like one sound and not 4 different sounds playing together. And you can play around a lot with these different algorithms and modules and just come up with your kind of distortion you like. There's also different options like input distortion and you can change the tonality a little bit, but I found these settings to work really well for my particular example here. After this, we have another raw on 22%. And this adds a little bit more of the high-end texture and crunchiness. On the low band, we have the diode again. On the mids, the digital. And on the highs, the bit crush for the nice noisy texture. And with a higher mix, it would be a little bit too much. And this is why I only had this on 22%. Next up, we have an OTT to level out everything. But only with 28%. Then there's an EQ to cut out some of the muddy mids in this area. This cleans it up a lot. And now we have an EQ to just check the frequency spectrum again. So it's doing nothing. Now we have a split. And the split divides the signal into a high band and a low band. On the high band, we have this EQ and now effects. And on the low band, we have this EQ and the kicked height again to just give the sub a little bit of a different tonality. And together sounds like this right now. And after this, we have a redux, which is basically bit crushing. Without and with. And when we bring up the tri-wet, it really despises the signal, and I only wanted a little amount of that in this sound. After that, we have another parallel chain, and the first one goes into this low pass. So I basically only cut out the very high end at around 8K. On this other band, we have this high band again. And on this, I'm using the shifter, with the ring mod feature. And a lot of drive, as you can see. And this helps us a lot bringing up the high-end texture and just making it really, really crunchy and full. And I think this really works well together. Without, and now with. It might even be a little bit too loud. So you can turn down the drive or the overall volume of this track a little bit if you want. After this, we have another disperser again. So you can just type in disperser and load in the rack. But if you have the standard disperser plugin, just use this. It's a bit easier. Then we have some hybrid reverb again, but only 21%. And on the EQ, I cut out the mid, so it's only on the high end. A little bit stronger. So this helps us making the sound a little bit more wet. After this, we have another raw with 2 stages. So I'm using it in serial. The first stage has the noise module and the second stage, the poly module. The first stage sounds like this. And the second stage on top sounds like this. It makes it sound really, really dense. And it's on 50% mix. I boosted the low end a little bit. Then we have another raw, also with 2 stages again. The first stage sounds like this with the fractal shaper. Also with 50% mix. And the second stage sounds like this. So it really, really brings up everything. And now we have another notch filter. And a saturator with wave shaping. Let's see what happens when we bring up the tri-wet. So you can get more crunchiness out of this, but it also loses the volume a little bit, so I only have this on 30%. Following this wave shaper, we have another saturator with the bass shaper. And I think I lowered the bass shelf right here to just make the bass louder, because when you lower the shelf, it makes it louder. I don't know what's happening here, but it just works like this, I guess. And it's on 17% mix. And after this, we have an OTT on 12% mix, so not really much, but it just helps bring everything together a little bit better. And that's it for the processing of all these layers. But there's one layer missing, which is also essential, and that's the transient layer. We haven't talked about the transient layer yet. And what you can do is including the transient layer within the layers we just talked about. So you can add a transient layer here, but the transient layer loses the power because of all the processing. And this is why I excluded the transient layer from the main processing. And we now have another collision, which sounds like this. So it's basically just a click on the B module and on a high tune, short decay, and I tweaked some parameters here. You can just copy the settings or tweak around to your likings. And I heavily boosted it with OTT. And now you can hear the transient power. Another OTT actually. Now we have an EQ to just cut out the mids and the low end. And a glue compressor to just bring up the transient character a little bit more. And finally another EQ to just clean up the signal a bit more here and get rid of some unwanted mids. And now everything together sounds like this. I also lowered the volume by 10 decibels, as you might see here. But now we got a really, really powerful tearout gun with a nice and clean transient, which is not affected by all the processing and distortion, and a heavy, wide, distorted tearout gun like you love it. You might dial in the high end a little bit more and lower the high end a little bit within the processing, because it can get a little bit harsh. Let's quickly do that with this EQ and just do like this little shelf. Now it already sounds better. You can also see the sub is really loud. This is always really important that the sub is the loudest part. In a tearout gun, obviously, you need a strong transience, a strong tonality, and a nice pattern. And for context reasons, I'm also using the delay here on 100% mix, but no feedback, to just delay the signal by 17 milliseconds to make it work a little bit better in a context setting with some drums and stuff, which I will also show you in a second. So now the final tearout gun sounds like this. In context, it now sounds like this. It's a different approach than my usual approach, and I will definitely change some things when I'm actually using this in a song. So I would work in audio following up, so I would get rid of some artifacts which OTT causes, so I can make it the cleanest way possible, and also layer it with more tone layers on top and just make it work better in a full song environment. Because now the main sound is just this, which already is a lot of layers. But I would also add some background sounds, some more half-time stuff like on the first and on the third hit, and some vocal effects, just some fun sounds in between. This is an approach of making a tearout gun only with stock effects. So please let me know in the comments what you think of this and if I was able to help you with the explanations. And also make sure to drop a like and comment. And also once again, shout out to Virtual Riot, shout out to Rampage Open Air 2026 for this insane experience. I'm eternally grateful. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe. See you in the next video. Have a great day and goodbye.